Bradley Bowman is Senior Director of the Centre on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies and joins me now. Bradley, thanks very much for your time. I mean, there are many desperate individual stories. We've just heard one of them there. But I wonder what you make of this Ukrainian ability to maintain a rearguard action and indeed even to be pushing the Russians back around places like Kharkiv.
Thanks for the opportunity to join you, and thanks for the question. You know, the stories that you're covering there are just so heartbreaking and admirable at the same time. And, you know, before the invasion, a lot of us were counting tanks and armored vehicles and aircraft and talking about the numeric supremacy of the Russians, overlooking fundamental concepts like do they actually have the means to employ them in a combined arms way. But the biggest thing I think many overlooked was the determination of a free people to defend their homes. And, you know, when you combine the bravery of the Ukrainian people to defend their land against an unprovoked invasion with the weapons that the United States and the British and others have provided them, it's a formidable combination. And as a result, we've seen in many places in Ukraine, the Russians reaching what we call the military culminating point. We saw the Ukrainians defeat the Russian offensive targeting Kyiv. They've denied the Russians air supremacy. More than 2.5, 3 months into this conflict, they've inflicted more losses on the Russians than they experienced in 10 years of combat in Afghanistan. And in places, they've actually started to go on the counteroffensive, pushing the Russians back from Kharkiv, and in some of them even making it all the way to the Russian border. And that's not even to speak of the heroic defense that we've seen in the plant in Mariupol that has bought precious time for Ukrainian defenders elsewhere to refit their forces and receive assistance from the United States and others.
And given your military background and expertise, what do you make of the intelligence we get that President Putin himself is starting to take almost a direct hand in military operation?
You know, it's almost a grand strategic version of what we've seen on the battlefield. You know, we know that Russia does not have a well-trained and disciplined non-commissioned officer corps like, frankly, the United States, the British, and the Ukrainians have. And that's why we've seen a lot of Russian generals going forward, frankly, and getting killed because they didn't have the non-commissioned officers to implement orders with good order and discipline. And, you know, Putin's perhaps seen that, you know, what he was told about his forces in terms of this much trumpeted modernization hasn't really panned out very well, has it? And so, you know, he's starting to understand that that the Ukrainians are not the pushovers that he thought they were, and that they will defend their homes. And so I think he's probably, I think he's going to focus on the Mariupol region and the land bridge to Crimea, and try to lock in as much of the gains in the Donbass as possible. Yeah,
you mentioned Mariupol there, and we've seen pictures of many of the Ukrainian soldiers being bussed out of the Azov-style steelworks. Of course, they refused on numerous occasions to surrender, to meet the deadlines being imposed upon them by the Russian forces. But I guess there will be a very genuine desire for a prisoner exchange on both sides. I mean, that matters to the Russians every bit as much as it would to Ukrainians, presumably.
It does. I think it's a valid point. But, you know, I would just encourage your viewers not to miss the extraordinary bravery there. I mean, we're talking about people just wounded and amputations going on in unsanitary conditions without medicine or you know, to dull the pain. But they've held out, you know, for roughly 2.5 months and held, you know, thousands. According to Ukrainian estimates, they held 17 battalion tactical groups in and around Mariupol, roughly 20,000 troops through their bravery there. And that prevented them from turning to the Donbass and conducting that pincer movement designed to annihilate Ukrainian forces. So I think this, in the history of urban warfare, this is going to go down as an extraordinary stand that bought valuable time for the Ukrainians as they defend their homes.
Yeah, still clearly a very long and desperate path to be trodden. But Bradley, thank you very much indeed. Bradley Bowman.